Tonight, Border Patrol in the Northwest Territories and managing COVID-19.
In many ways, he's one of the first, if not the first, Indigenous photographer in Canada.
And we get a glimpse at the James Brady exhibit. Good evening and welcome to APTN National News. I'm Daryl Stranger. Entry into the Northwest Territories is under strict regulation and has been since mid-March. Our reporter Charlotte Moritz-Jacobs gives us this update on who's allowed in, what paperwork they need, and what happens when they don't follow the rules.
If you want to come into the Northwest Territories, you better have a 2-week isolation plan ready. Border agents at this NWT Alberta check stop are here 24/7, and they'll ask for paperwork and IDs. Workers here document who's coming in and pass information to other government workers in charge of COVID-19 rule enforcement. Supply chain and essential workers are exempt from the 2-week self-isolation. But for the roughly 30 passenger vehicles that pass through here daily, around 12 are turned away if they don't have the proper approval. Dennis Marchiori, Deputy Chief Public Health Officer, says not everyone understands the rules.
There is a lot of information on various websites about COVID-19. Some of it's American, some of it's Canadian. Sometimes it's understanding the difference between coming from an international location and that you have to follow federal quarantine rules, which are more strict than our self-isolation.
For these southern travelers picking up 5 dogs from the north, the situation is frustrating. Normally, they would have gone to Yellowknife instead of waiting around, as an SPCA staff had to drive 7 hours to the border. As they waited around, another traveler breezed through the border, able to drive to Yellowknife SPCA for a horse.
And he was exempted to get the horse, and we weren't exempted to get the dog. So I think, and we had applied 3 months ago, so I think, even in terms of perhaps both are non-essential reasons because it's animals, but we at least went through a process, we presented a plan, we were very cognizant of people's concerns around the virus, and we presented a plan.
Since the spring, warnings and fines have been given out for those not following COVID-19 regulations. But some disagree with the rules. Michael Courtney is one of them. He walked across the gated BC and NWT border this June. RCMP kicked him out. He wasn't a resident, but was born in the NWT.
They drove me back to the border, and once they were gone, I told them, once you guys are gone, I'm coming back.
He walked over 700 kilometers, camping along the way, determined to see his family for the first time in 16 years.
I've already, been self-isolated. I've been quarantined on my own out in the bush for more than 20 days. I think I'm good. I haven't had any symptoms, and definitely after that long, you're not asymptomatic either.
After 4 days in Bechecal, RCMP and health officials came knocking.
The health official gave me 2 options. A, we're going to fine you and fine your sister's mother $10,000 for hosting you. Or B, you can come to the isolation center and avoid all the fines and just self-isolate for 2 weeks. So I said, yeah, okay, clear, cut, and simple, let's go. Just to put the rest of the community at ease.
Courtney says the next day, a different health officer showed up with a $1,725 fine. He's one of 8 to receive them. Since March 21st, more than 12,000 self-isolation plans have been submitted to the territorial government, with over 1,600 pending approval.
We provide stats that we give out warnings and written warnings. And then at some point in time, we have done enough education. And if someone completely violates the public health order and travels from the Northwest Territories against public health order, then it's a fine.
APTN News was told the government is looking at different ways to consider entry into the NWT and for COVID-19 testing. But for now, this border and these rules stay. Charlotte Moritz-Jacobs, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
Nunavut has paid over $24 million to Northern Airlines so they keep serving communities during the COVID-19 pandemic. The federal government has only paid $5 million of that, but that may be changing. The airline support is huge for Nunavut, as every Nunavut community is fly-in. The airlines haven't received new funding since June. Today, Nunavut's premier explained why they want Ottawa to pay more.
And we agreed that we're going to join forces to try to get Transport Canada to come up with a compensation package or assistance package sooner. And that's the main reason we haven't come up with a package yet, because we're waiting on the federal government, because they said that one is coming and we're still waiting.
Canada's top doctors say a vaccine will not be the silver bullet when it comes to fighting the COVID-19 virus. They say they will need to monitor the efficiency and safety of any new drugs, and that a vaccine would merely be a new tool in the fight against this deadly virus.
Vaccine is a very important aspect of the response going forwards, but we can't at this stage just put all of our focus on in the hopes that this is the silver bullet solution. It is a very important solution if we get a safe and effective vaccine.
There are currently more than 100 vaccines in development. About a dozen are already being tested on humans. According to a new survey, the majority of Canadians are ready to get the vaccine after one is approved. And in Ottawa, jail has now confirmed its first case of COVID-19. APTN has previously reported about inmates at the Ottawa Carleton Detention Centre. They have staged 2 hunger strikes in the past 2 months over concerns of a lack of healthy food and COVID precautions. Ontario Solicitor General Sylvia Jones's office told APTN efforts are being made to address past concerns. The COVID case was reported yesterday, and the Solicitor General's office said it was discovered during a routine testing of a new inmate. The jail is conducting contact tracing, and the infected inmate is in medical isolation. We want to hear what you think about this or any other story. Here's how to continue the conversation. Send your emails to news@aptn.ca. Find us online at aptnnews.ca and on youtube.com/aptn news. Also, you can follow APTN News on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for more Indigenous news. The Morden senior men's hockey team in southwestern Manitoba are changing their name. The old name has been deemed offensive. The change comes after the team announced a formal review last month. A new name and logo have not yet been decided, but the team says acknowledging change was just the beginning for the small volunteer group. In a statement released today, the team executives said, quote, "We wish to represent every citizen of Morden and made the decision to make changes moving forward." They also said after the conversations with the community, they have a better understanding of how the name and logo are perceived. Morden has been in the Southeast Manitoba Hockey League since 1986. It's time for a short break, but coming up, we speak with Senator Murray Sinclair about his new role as mentor at a Winnipeg law firm. Stay tuned. Beginning in the east, 29 in Charlottetown and 22 in St. John's. 26 degrees in Cartwright and 25 in Happy Valley Goose Bay. 23 in Quebec City and 19 in Val-d'Or. 24 in a mix of sun and cloud in Toronto and 23 in a mix of sun and cloud in Sarnia. 21 in Wawa and 26 in Sioux Lookout. 25 in Churchill and 27 in sun in God's Lake. 28 in a mix of sun and cloud in Winnipeg and 26 degrees in Dauphin. 27 in sun in Regina and 29 in sun in North Battleford. 26 in sun in Stony Rapids and 28 degrees in sun in La Ronge. Welcome back. He's been a lawyer, judge, chair of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and Canadian senator. Now you can add mentor to the list. Murray Sinclair plans to join Manitoba's largest Indigenous law firm, Cochrane Saxberg. To instruct lawyers, there is an Indigenous perspective. Senator Sinclair joins us now. Senator Sinclair, thank you for taking time to speak with us. Why are you picking this particular time to move into this new role of mentor?
Well, you know, with the COVID-19 pandemic and the inability to travel to Ottawa and limitations on movement generally, I began to think about the challenges that were facing Indigenous communities who wanted to move into self-government. And one of the things that people I spoke to talked about repeatedly was that they wanted to begin to develop their own legal systems and their own laws, and they needed help to do that. And even the lawyers that they were consulting often didn't know how to take advantage of their own traditions, cultures, and their own legal systems that have historically been around, and in some cases have been dormant, but in others are still quite active, particularly in the West Coast. And they just want to know how to bring that into the modern times and start using those traditions and those systems that have stood them in good stead for so many years. So when I was talking with Sonny Cochran, who's one of the partners here, about this problem, he indicated that he had a young Indigenous law firm with about 18 lawyers, and half of them are Indigenous, and that he thought that the opportunity to mentor them, to prepare them for the future, was a good idea. And also at the same time, I had been speaking with the Law Society of Manitoba about developing some training modules for them to use for their compliance with Call to Action 28 of the Truth and Reconciliation Report. And so it just seemed like a perfect fit at this time. The Senate will not be sitting for a while, but when the Senate does call, I'll be, of course, going back there. And this will not be a full-time position. It'll be one where from time to time I'll come in and work with the young lawyers and basically just help educate them about the legal systems.
And Harold Cochran compared you joining his firm to Wayne Gretzky joining the team. What can you bring to the rink, so to speak?
Well, of course, my years of experience as a lawyer and a judge within the legal system, as well as my years of experience in the Senate, I think given me a perspective of how law works and how law could work. But also over the years, particularly during the Aboriginal Justice Inquiry and during the TRC, I participated in preparing reports that talked about the existence of pre-existing legal systems that Indigenous people had been utilizing for thousands of years before the arrival of Europeans, and how that had been denigrated by the Canadian government, particularly by Canadian society generally, and suppressed to the extent that it was no longer available for them to utilize. And with the advent of the discussion around the elimination of the Indian Act, now the question is going to be, what's the nature of the legal systems that Indigenous people are going to be able to utilize? And I think that in order for them to be able to do it properly, they need people who are able to talk about both the Western legal system as well as the Indigenous legal systems that they will be bringing to the table.
How do you expect to fulfill your duties as both a mentor and a senator? Will you leave the Senate?
Eventually I will. There's no question of that. I told people when I was going to the Senate that I wanted to do it for about 5 years to see if I could help the Senate grow into the kind of institution that it was meant to be from the outset. But my heart was always in the law and understanding the law and figuring out how to get the changes brought about in the legal system that were needed, but at the same time to assist young Indigenous lawyers. I did a lot of lectures and still do lectures at law schools across Canada, but more importantly, now I see the need for young practitioners, whether they work for Indigenous clients or whether they work for industries that are in contractual relations, negotiations with Indigenous clients, to understand how Indigenous thinking works when it comes to legal questions.
With police shootings in the news, how dismayed are you that the recommendations of the Aboriginal Justice Inquiry that you co-chaired and the Royal Commission of Aboriginal Peoples have been ignored or forgotten?
Well, you know, they can only be ignored for so long. Systemic racism now is at the forefront of everybody's thinking. and understanding what systemic racism is and how to deal with it, and put it into not only perspective for ourselves, but put it into a place where it no longer functions so influentially with institutions like police, the justice system, and Canadian society, is now part of a dialogue that we need to have. And so for that reason, I think that this step that I'm now taking as part of my own career will help to contribute to that conversation significantly, because now we're going to start creating a body of Indigenous legal thinkers and Indigenous practitioners, or practitioners generally who are not Indigenous, who will have an understanding, a better understanding of how Indigenous people will want to have their own legal systems, but in many cases how they want the existing legal systems to function. That's in their best interest as well.
Senator Sinclair, thank you for taking the time again to join us here today.
Well, thank you for having me, and thanks for your interest.
We have to take one more break, but still to come, the work of Canada's first Indigenous photographer is now on display for the first time. We'll have that after the break. Over to Western Canada now. 27 in sun in Fort Chippewa and 29 in Fort McMurray. 29 degrees in sun in Calgary and 31 in sun in Lethbridge. 33 degrees in sun in Penticton and 26 in Quesnel. 26 in a mix of sun and cloud in Fort Nelson and 23 in Prince George. 20 degrees in Mayo and 21 in Dawson. 22 in a mix of sun and cloud in Fort Simpson and 25 in sun in Trout Lake. 15 in cloud in Colville Lake and 16 in Fort McPherson. 27 degrees in Baker Lake and 23 in Chesterfield. 15 degrees in Cape Dorset and 7 degrees in Clyde River. Welcome back. A report from the representative for children and youth in British Columbia shows young people are becoming homeless at alarming rates. In this encore story, APTN's Tina House gives us the details.
Catherine McParland is the author of this new report, entitled From Marginalized to Magnified. McParland grew up in care, and after aging out, she also became homeless. She worked with a cohort of young people to develop the report.
It's cold, dark, and the snow is falling. Your feet are numb with fingers like icicles. You need a place to be warm. Your tummy rumbles as you try and remember the last time you ate. Loneliness sets in as you remember loved ones from the past.
Those words are the stark reality for those that are homeless, surviving any way they can with makeshift shelters or living in tent cities like this one. According to the representative for children and youth, Jennifer Charlesworth, young people leaving government care are more likely to become homeless if not given the proper supports.
Youth homelessness is a serious issue in BC, and young people who are in government care or receiving services or living in poverty are some of the most vulnerable to experiencing homelessness due to the trauma and the displacement and the experiences that they've had thus far in their young lives.
The report sheds light on the root causes of youth homelessness, such as no support after aging out and the many barriers youth face. McParland hopes the testimonies from youth in her report will be listened to by government.
The report we are releasing today magnifies the voices of marginalized youth to ensure their expertise is heard. It recommends that the government listen to these voices and put in place a provincial plan to end youth homelessness by January 2021.
First Nations Leadership Council member Robert Phillip says the timeline is very ambitious, but he's encouraging all levels of government, industry and organizations to join the discussion.
If we all work together, we can address and move forward to tackle this issue of homelessness for the youth. So in that discussion, the action items, and then work on them to complete them. We might not be able to get all of it done, but I think if we tackle it one by one, then we can address it. If we can get one kid off the street, if we can get one person that have a home, I think that's a job well done.
Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
Canada's first Indigenous photographer captured the resilience of Metis and First Nations people during hard times. He traveled to many Indigenous communities in Alberta and Saskatchewan from the 1930s to the 1960s. Now, the work of James Brady can be viewed for the first time. Tamara Pimentel has the story.
The late James Brady, a Métis activist who served in the military, a driving force behind the creation of Métis settlements in Alberta in the 1930s. And he is only now being recognized for his photography.
In many ways, he's one of the first, if not the first, Indigenous photographer in Canada. And a lot has been written about his politics, but not much has been done about his actual photography. So curating this was really exciting for me. It's the first time that James Brady's photos are being exhibited in a gallery, in a museum space.
Brady snapped pictures for 30 years, a record of the Indigenous people he met on the way, and now they're on display to the public. The Glenbow Museum in Calgary has been collecting these photos for the past 30 years. Paul Cisequasis of Beardy's and Okamesis First Nation in Saskatchewan is the curator of enclosing some snapshots.
This was at the time of, the pass system and residential schools were, at their height, and Métis rights settlements were still struggling to have their rights recognized. So there's so much struggle going on at this time. Yet his photos show a different reality. They show people hard at work, people laughing, people having fun. So I think it shows another side of Indigenous reality, which is despite the hardships and the hard times, you have humor is still there, kinship is still there, family is still there.
At age 59 in 1967, Brady disappeared during a trip to northern Saskatchewan. His remains were never found. It isn't known whether Brady ever considered these photographs to be a record, but Cisequasis says that's just what they've become.
There's a chance to see snapshots of Indigenous life over the course of 4 decades by one individual who traveled to many communities. So I think that is a very unique and interesting perspective.
The work of James Brady can be seen at the Glenbow Museum or virtually on the website.
He was very personable on a different level, so there are a lot of stories of him in different communities. He was kind of a big name during his lifetime.
Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Calgary.
It's great to see Brady's story and work finally being shared after all these years. That's been your look at APTN National News. For Indigenous news anytime, you can visit our website at aptnnews.ca. I'm Daryl Stranger. Have a great night.